Senetflix. The word is Pinoy wordplay, combining the riveting Senate hearings on POGOs on the one hand and the streaming platform Netflix on the other. Through the Senate inquiry and with the parallel hearings in the House of Representatives, we now have an almost complete picture not only of Guo Huaping, alias Alice Guo, but of POGOs as a criminal enterprise. What do we know for certain, and what are the unknowns that remain? Hi, I'm John Nery, and you are in a special edition of In the Public Square. Before Senetflix became popular viewing, only a few senators were doing the actual work of digging into the damage caused by POGOs. Senator Risa Ontiveros and Senator Sherwin Gatchalian were once voices in the wilderness. Today, they remain the clearest voices and always bring the most receipts. The Senate inquiry is predicated on one speech and 5 Senate resolutions. Senator Gatchalian filed 4 of those resolutions. He joins us today. Welcome, Senator Sherwin, and thank you for joining us in the Public Square.
Thank you, John. Thank you for inviting me.
Sen, are we nearing the end of Senetflix?
Well, there are 2 cases that were filed by government. One is on the money laundering case, and the other one is on the human trafficking case, among others. No? The other ones are the cancellation of birth certificate, the quo warranto, and the tax evasion case. But the 2 major ones will be the money laundering and the human trafficking. So having said that, those cases will now take over because that's the formal judicial process already. But insofar as the Senate investigation is concerned, and insofar as the Banban Pogo Hub is concerned, I think we're almost at the tail end.
Okay.
And in fact, the hearing this coming Tuesday will focus on the Porac Pogo Hub because that's equally as big as the Bamban Pogo Hub.
Sen, what have we established so far as fact? I was struck by the slides that you showed, for instance, establishing how much money and so on. Can we go through them? Can you walk us through them?
Yeah, I know a lot of people are quite interested with the history, the farming background of Guo Huaping, her birth certificate, and now the love life. No? But the most important and the bigger picture will be how she built that Pogo Hub in Bamban. No? Bamban is a third-class municipality. I've been there a few times just to get the feel of the place, and it's really a rural area. But one thing that goes around my mind: why Bamban? No? Out of all the places, and if you've been to that facility, it's really a huge facility. In fact, tawag nga nila dun BGC of Bamban or Tarlac. So what we did is we asked professional engineers to cost out the buildings and the structure. And the figure that we got is about between 6 to 7 billion pesos. No?
To build it.
To build it
That's
from
right,
scratch.
yeah.
No? That includes the value of land. So the next question is, who brought in that 7 billion pesos to build that facility? And that was the question from day one. No? And no one seems to know the answer. So we called on AMLAC to look at this angle and file the appropriate cases. So they filed 2 petitions, one to look at the bank accounts of all the people involved, and then number 2 is to freeze the assets in case there's an issue on money laundering, both of which they got. So in summary, they detected, and we saw in the papers, that close to about 7 billion pesos came to different accounts, one of which is the personal account of Guo Huaping, aka Alice Guo. Almost the same amount, almost 7 billion, in a span between 2017 to 2024. And that's the time when all of these POGOs are happening, most especially the construction of the Bamban Pogo Hub.
Sen, let me separate the 2. First, I want to talk about your estimate for the construction cost, 6 to 7 billion. I have been, in fact, to the site. It is huge. First of all, it's large, and it's brand new. There's several buildings, and then the villas. it's obviously a lot of money.
Yeah.
So in putting together the estimate, you sat down with architects, contractors, and so on.
Professional engineers.
And then you if it's like this, if this is the square foot, that sort of thing.
Correct. Normally they can do it tabletop.
Okay.
All they need to see are the pictures and also the parang Google map, the aerial map of the facility, both of which I sent because we don't have the plans.
That's right.
So what they did is they conducted a tabletop survey. That's why the range is between 6 to 7, more or less.
And but even at the lower end, at 6 billion, that's still a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That's
Correct.
a lot of money, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
The second part, with the help of AMLAC, you were able to take a look at bank accounts.
Yes.
So this includes bank accounts of Alice Guo.
Yeah. So the three major bank accounts will be Alice Guo, her personal bank account. I think she had 30 plus different accounts.
Okay.
And then QJJ Farms,
Farms,
which is apparently from her statement is the major business entity. QJJ Embroidery, and the other one is another company called QC Genetics.
Okay.
Of course, there are other companies, but these are the 4 companies that AMLAC focused.
So what did AMLAC find that there was cash flowing through that?
Yeah, there's cash flow. For example, in the case of Alice Guo, 1.9 billion pesos went into her account, and if you look at the graph, prior to 2018, there was very few transactions.
Okay.
It was very little transactions happening. And starting from 2018, the transactions surged, most especially the deposits that came in. And we saw 1.9 billion pesos went into her accounts in a span of 2018 to 2024. 1.2 in the form of checks, and 600 million plus in the form of cash. So these are hard cash that they deposit. And based on the AMLAC report, they saw that a lot of the transactions are cash basis, deposits and also payments. And these are how money launderers work. They usually operate without any trace as much as possible. That's what I saw in the documents. They also use a lot of dummies, both individuals and corporations. Hence, the Guo family businesses were used as conduits and dummies for the transactions to build the Pogo Hub in Bamban.
So 1.9 billion over 6 or 7 years in Alice Guo's personal account.
Correct.
You also said that QJJ Farms had almost 3 billion.
Almost 3 billion.
So that would be 1.9, almost 3,
5 billion.
And then
QJJ Embroidery, I think that's about 500 million.
Okay.
And then QC Genetics is about 300 million.
Okay.
So that's more or less about 6 billion na, more or less, no?
What you're doing here is establishing the possible basis of where the 6 to 7 billion came from.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
I mean, the Senate is not a court of law. Right?
Yes.
But what you're saying is that if you can't prove where your money came from, we can at least point to possible sources.
Correct. Because we looked at the financial statements of the companies. We looked at the tax returns of Alice Guo, and none of the Guo family businesses generated that much business. And none of the Guo family businesses also generated that much cash. So meaning the cash came from external sources. And if you look at if you try to relate this to her lifestyle. Recently, in the last hearing, we found out that she tried to buy a house in Baguio, in that really posh village. So, in other words,
all 90 million or something.
Correct. So, all this cash coming in, she's probably taking some percentage out of it,
Okay, right.
Because it's a huge amount of money, and it more or less. The timing is also very important because even, for example, in QC Genetics, prior to 2018, there was no transaction. As in dormant account. And then all of a sudden, in 2018, there are deposits that came into that account.
Sen, the first time I saw her, it occurred to me, could she be a dummy? I mean, like, people are using her to run, all these transactions. But you've met her many times. You've seen her up close. Do you think she's capable of?
I think, John, that will be her defense.
Okay.
I'm sure her defense will be, I'm a victim and I was just fooled by all of these syndicates and I was just used. I'm sure that will be her defense later on. But we also saw transaction wherein she had active participation. Like, for example, in the payment for electricity, that area is run by Tarelco, which is the electric co-op. From 2000, even prior to her being a mayor, from 2017 or 18, she was already paying the electricity bills. And then from 2022, when she became the mayor, until it was raided, she was paying the electricity bills, all of it. None came from Baofulan, none came from Hongsheng, none came from Zunyuan. It was either her personal account or her family business account. And there was one account or one billing that we saw. She paid 28 million in cash. As in cash, binayaran niya ang Tarelco. So, my analysis of that is she had active participation because she knew if you will not pay electricity, obviously Tarelco will cut electricity and there's no business whatsoever that will happen in that area.
In reviewing her business history, Sen, did you find a turning point? Like, she was doing legitimate businesses and at a certain point,
That's a very good question. In fact, John, that's a very good analysis. I was thinking of that also. Was she in this even prior or... I don't know the answer clearly, but definitely if you look at the deposits and the transaction, it all started around 2017.
Okay.
And that's, if you remember, that's when this whole POGO businesses started to come into our country. And
That's
then President Duterte eventually issued an executive order to regulate it because it was unregulated before. But interestingly, when we were looking also at their flights, the father, the mother, even Alice Guo, started traveling a lot around 2017, around that time. Before, they were not traveling so much, and then all of a sudden, 2017, they started traveling, especially the father. The father traveled around the region and China and to China, I think almost
2017.
Almost, I think, twice a week to almost every week. So, in other words, there was some transaction happening because before you were not flying and then all of a sudden you were flying. No? We opened that up during the hearing and Alice Guo simply said, he had businesses in China, but almost twice a week flying around. So that must be there's a sense of urgency and important activity that you have to fly out.
Is there an attempt to bring him to the Senate, the father?
The father, unfortunately, he's not party to the case yet. No. So in the cases that were filed, it's focused on Alice Guo and the incorporators of the company.
Who was she? Can you already speak of like a boss or a big boss as far as Pogo, the Bamban Pogo is concerned? Or other POGOs?
My own analysis, John, is it's a syndicate, no? They're all part of it, no? Including Guo Huaping. In this case, she probably provided, she opened the doors, no? And provided the network, provided, she had very good command of English, Tagalog, Mandarin, and even Fukien. So she navigated, or she helped navigate these individuals here in the Philippines. She helped with the applications, both in the local government and other applications. So she had active participation. Now, one of the loose ends that we're trying to figure out is where did the money come from? And that's still under investigation by AMLAC. I'm sure AMLAC knows about it because they can look at the bank accounts and trace that where it's coming from. But that's one of the I think one aspect that AMLAC is currently investigating.
The Bamban property is like 7 hectares or something?
It's about 10 hectares.
10 hectares. Did she buy them, piecemeal and put it all together so it becomes a valuable asset that she can offer to her investors, sa Pogo? Or she bought it, she said that was her toka, that was her ambag.
Yeah.
She bought it in one go.
From what we saw, Baofulan executed to deed of sale, and Alice Guo bought it first, and then Baofulan bought it second, and it was bought all at the same time. No? And actually, that was her spill, no? That she just consolidated the land and eventually turned it over to Baofu. But we saw in the record, she's the president of the company. She issued the checks.
Yeah.
She applied for the electricity. We saw that in the documents. She applied for all the building permits, the lono. And in fact, in the testament of her accountant, she actively incorporated Hongsheng and Zunyuan. No? So I remember her accountant testifying in the Senate saying that she received explicit instruction to help these two companies who are the tenants of Baofulan. No? So in other words, she owns Baofulan, but she's also incorporating the two companies who's supposedly leasing that facility.
She is a figure of curiosity to many Filipinos. That's why many Filipinos are tuning in to the Senate hearings, no? And also the congressional hearings. But as you earlier pointed out, the real issue here is the POGOs, no? And the criminal enterprise that they represent. What have we established at this point in time about POGOs?
Well, definitely, POGO as a whole, its business model is to get bets from China and elsewhere. No? But when we looked at the data, almost 95% came from China. And apparently, from what I read from my conversation with some people who are engaged in gaming, is when China started to crack down. Before, apparently, all of these POGO operators are in Macau. Okay. And then China started to crack down this POGO operators. So they went into the Golden Triangle, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, that area. And then when they got news that Philippines is issuing license, so instead of hiding in that Golden Triangle, they came to the Philippines because they're now legitimate. They have a license, and using that license, they can go to the bank, they can raise money, they can bring in people here. So they moved here to the Philippines. That's why we saw POGO hubs everywhere in the country. No? The one is in Cavite, the one's in Clark, the one's in Porac and Bamban. And that's the information that we got. Because I was also asking why the Philippines. And apparently that license is valuable to these operators because it gave them legitimacy.
Should we have opened ourselves to POGOs in the first place? I mean, or is POGO itself as a business model already vulnerable to criminal enterprise?
I think in the beginning, when they came here, there was no crime. And I think all of us, including myself, thought that this is a legitimate business. And this business can be sustainable. But it morphed after, especially during the pandemic. I saw that the shift from a perception of legitimate business to becoming involved in human trafficking and scamming. I think what happened here, this is my own analysis, John. What happened is when they saw the license, all of these criminal elements abroad came here because that license gave them legitimacy. And they realized that they can use that license as a front. And that's what they did. So one license, but they will get other sub-licensees. And the sub-licensees are also involved in criminal elements. And then some of the sub-licensees have had no intention of doing gaming. Their intention is scamming. That's why we saw
Yeah.
a lot of the licensees are involved in scamming. But for example, I'll give you a very clear example. The one in Clark, there's one licensee, but they subleased it twice. And the last sublessee is involved in scamming. No? So in other words, they had no intention of doing legitimate business or POGOs. They just wanted to hide in that umbrella or in that license cover.
I'd like to note that you have filed 4 resolutions in 2 years, no?
Yeah.
Calling for an investigation into what POGOs were doing in terms of trafficking in persons and so on. So, 2 in 2023, 2 in 2024.
Yeah.
What was the trigger for you?
In fact, John, we filed a committee report in 2022, end of 2022. I filed a committee report. Just to backtrack a bit, some senators filed a resolution to study POGOs. It was Senator Grace Poe, Senator Joel Villanueva, and myself. No? And the tenor of the resolution is to study the cost and benefit. And when we were doing it, we were studying it, there was already a lot of criminality happening. No, not as bad as in 2023, 2024, but there was already kidnapping, there was already torture. And so the committee, when I filed the committee report, we recommended to the Senate at that time to already phase out POGOs. Because it's already...
This was the Ways and Means
This is the Ways and Means Committee. So it was filed in this committee because we were studying the cost-benefit. And at that time, DOF also had the same conclusion that the social cost is far greater than the benefit. NEDA also had the same. So we recommended to the body to ban it. After that, all of this criminal... It was getting worse. No? All of these human trafficking criminal activities were starting to build up again. So that's why I filed resolutions along the way. But the original committee report was the committee report that we filed in 2022, assigned by majority of the committee members.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, 10 out of 18 of your committee members said, we should ban POGOs. Was it difficult to reach that consensus?
It was difficult. It was difficult because they had different suggestions. I wanted an immediate ban. Some wanted 6 months. Some wanted 2 years.
But fast forward 2 years, the Senate has the consensus.
Correct. At least not formally. We don't have a formal consensus, which I'm lobbying for all of us to come up with a formal consensus. But at least informally, I think with the statements that we read from the senators, they are in favor of banning POGOs.
Did you expect President Marcos Jr. to make that announcement during his
No, actually, John, no. I didn't expect that. I was hoping, but I didn't expect that. In fact, someone told me that was not part of the original speech. Apparently, that's why it came at the end. Some members of the media, I think, were given an advance copy of the speech, and they told me it wasn't part of the original speech. And I think President Marcos, our president, after analyzing the situation carefully, he added that towards the last part of the speech.
And now you're engaged in, as you put it, institutionalizing that ban, right?
Yes.
So the ban is taking. I mean, we have until the end of the year, right? Is that right?
Yes.
But and then you want to institutionalize it so that, as you said in your press conference last week, no future president can
reactivate that,
bring it back, unless you exercise political will, that sort of thing. So, can you walk us through that? What does that mean?
So actually, we finished the hearing on the ban in POGOs. So we're coming up with a committee report in the next 2 weeks. This will completely ban POGOs, revoke its taxation regime as well, and we will define clearly what POGOs are. Because we have to be very clear with the definition of POGOs and also the other components of POGOs. For example, the service contractors. I think that's also an important component because the service contractors morphed also to become sub-licensees. That's how we detected it. So we have to define it very well so that even after President Marcos, POGOs cannot have a resurgence in our country.
What was the thing that made the POGOs criminal? I mean, was it layering, sub-licensee under sub-licensee so that they can run all these illegal operations? I mean, in terms of the structure, what's the red flag there?
Apparently, after doing a lot of this due diligence, apparently POGOs itself, the business model itself, if you think of it in a different light, is inherently illegal, because it's getting bets from China, which considers gambling as illegal. So your source of income considers it illegal. If you reverse it, for example, if you reverse that case, if China started e-sabong in China and attracted bets from the Philippines, we will consider that illegal because in our country, for now, e-sabong is illegal. So that fundamental aspect of getting bets from China made it inherently illegal. On top of that, through research, we found out that because it's illegal, and the only people who has the capacity to do illegal things when it was thriving in Macau are all these criminal elements underground. And if you remember, once upon a time, Macau was also quite, it was embroiled in a lot of underground business groups. And apparently these groups are the ones running it. So that business model plus the one running it made POGOs a very dangerous business model because the groups that run it, those are the groups who have propensity to do all these illegal things. And they did, from illegal gambling, they morphed into scamming, they morphed into human trafficking and others.
And on top of that, it gives me no pleasure to say that our systems are lax. I mean, Alice Guo couldn't have done what she has done without complicity of public officials. Starting from her birth certificate and so on. So the unfortunate reality is that there is so much corruption, and that's what I guess also attracted all these players from abroad.
Yeah, that's what PAOK mentioned. I think I raised that with PAOK, and the exact word of, I think, Yusek Cruz was, they made the Philippines as their playground because they knew that they can get away with things with money. And on top of that, John, it's also the structure of our gaming industry, PAGCOR. PAGCOR is both the regulator and the operator.
That's right.
So on one hand, they make money. The other one is they regulate. So, but because it's one entity, obviously they will look at making money much more heavily than regulating. And the structure itself permitted this type of very loose environment for this type of criminal elements to come in.
Well, would that be something that your Ways and Means Committee will consider in the future? Deloading PAGCOR of some of its...
In fact, that's one of the legislative proposals coming out of this investigation, is to ready separate PAGCOR's operation and regulatory function. Probably create another entity for regulation, purely gaming regulation. PAGCOR is still deciding whether it wants to stay as an operator or regulator, but definitely the model there is to separate the two entities.
Another institution that has also come out not looking so fresh is the PNP. So even in the circumstances of the raid on the Bamban Pogo site, there's a controversy, and then we finally heard from General Karamat in the last hearing. Is it possible that the PNP is also complicit in all of this in the same way that PNP structurally is part of the Hueting problem?
Well, I'll be venturing into my own personal experiences as a public servant for a long time. That's highly possible, especially with gaming. I think gaming and gambling, to be honest about it, in the eyes of some PNP, not all, no, but some PNP officials, is a lesser evil. No? And I've seen that when I was a mayor. They treat it as a lesser evil. And I think with POGOs, it started that way. No? And these personalities involved in POGOs, they also know how to network.
Yeah.
They also know how to do PR. They also know how to build favors. They also know how to give people. So in other words, they've also penetrated, and made relationships with people, not only in PNP but people in government in general. No? So that's why it's quite. That's why when we had that executive session, and the intelligence officials were briefing us, in not so many words, no, that they've managed to increase their network already, because they have the money, they know how to navigate our political and our enforcement systems. They know how to invest as well.
In fact, I want to go back to something that you said last May when you warned about the possibility of what you called Pogo politics. You know, that Pogo money might be used to fund politicians and so on. Do you think that's the possibility remains high, or after several months of very intense scrutiny, maybe the possibility has lessened?
I think now, from what I hear, John, that some of the Pogo bosses are already packing their bags and leaving. I heard from PAGCOR, from 45 licenses, 4 have already pre-terminated their agreement with PAGCOR, and now they have only 41 left. And I heard from friends that some of them are actually leaving the country already. So they're packing their bags ahead of the end of the year deadline. So I think with that in mind, I don't think they will invest anymore in relationships in the Philippines, because they know that nothing's going to happen by end of the year, and that's a good thing for us.
That's a bit of good news.
But we hear a lot of, during the heydays of POGOs, we always hear that yung storya na some policemen are moonlighting as their bodyguard. And I've seen this in person. I've interacted in person. Some of them are moonlighting as bodyguards. Some of them are moonlighting as their yung escort. And that's true. No? And that's how far they have penetrated the system to get all of those security.
I remember when the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission first heard about what was happening in Bamban. Part of the story was the person who escaped was being enticed by a PNP officer, right? So that PNP officer was not on the right side of the right. So that was part of the origin story of this.
Correct.
So how do you? I know it's a huge. I mean, it's one of the largest organizations in the Philippines. But how do you reform the PNP?
It's a continuous activity or continuous process, John. And this is not only isolated with POGOs. I think we've seen this in many stories. It's just a continuous process, and we just have to make sure that the chief PNP that the president will appoint has good intention and reform-minded, because it's a continuous process. And I'm not generalizing. No, we have a lot of good policemen. We have a lot of honest policemen. I've seen it also on the ground. But admittedly, there are scalawags. And admittedly, some of them are or some of them get tempted with a lot of this money involved.
As a journalist, I also know that public scrutiny helps tamper criminal activity. So the two, I think that in the last 15 years or so, the two times that the Senate really focused on wetting, there really was a marked slowdown or a shutdown, even a shutdown in wetting operations. My worry, Sen, is once you go into the lawmaking part, you're done with the hearings. Maybe some of the the old gang will come back and say, okay, pwede na.
Correct.
Okay na.
Yeah.
Parang
Actually, I get that a lot also, John.
Yeah, so
We have to be vigilant. I think in this case, we have to be vigilant that these people, I mean, I'll give you a very good example. The supposedly big bosses have all escaped. Wang Zhiyang and the two involved in money laundering, Bao and Ri, they all escaped. And apparently they're nowhere to be found. So it's not going to be remote that they might come back, probably in a different form, probably different business. So we have to be vigilant. These are criminal elements. They have criminal networks, both here and abroad. And they're not going to go into legitimate business. Their track is to go into crime that makes a lot of money for them.
do you think that the Pogo issue is a non-partisan thing? Do you think it cuts across political lines?
I think when the president announced that POGOs will be banned, everyone, I think both the opposition and the administration, politicians, gave him a standing ovation. In fact, that's one of the loudest standing ovations in that speech. So it crossed party lines. I think it affected all Filipinos. And whenever we hear especially the human trafficking story and the torture story, it affects all of us. And especially our reputation. I was just talking to some friends from Malaysia, and whenever they read that there's human trafficking and torture, the immediate thing that comes to their mind is, Philippines is so dangerous, and how come they're allowing this type of business activity or this type of criminal elements to operate in their country? And that affects many of our friends from different parts of the world.
What do you see looking forward, Sen? So you said this coming Tuesday, the hearing will focus on the PORAC site. How many more hearings do you think are in the cards?
I think we'll focus on the PORAC hearing. Although the House made a lot of progress in that PORAC Pogo Hub. So we'll build on the hearings that they conducted. They've already extracted a lot of information, but the Senate will, ako personally, I'll pursue where they left off because I see a lot of loose ends on that part. But the PORAC Pogo Hub is no different to the Bambam Pogo Hub. We see a lot of similarities. Money coming in, how it was built, how the suppliers are being paid. So more or less, it's similar. What's important here is to know the personalities and also because wala pang case on the PORAC side. No? So we have to push the government agencies to complete their investigation and file cases already.
Are you in coordination with your House counterparts?
Not all of them because there are
four committees.
I think it's four committees.
Four committees.
But some, and we monitor. Personally, I monitor the hearings so we don't repeat the questions later on. No? So, but some, and we have all the transcript and documents that we will build on for the next hearing.
And what's in store for alias Alice Guo?
Well, the two cases have been filed. One in Valenzuela, one in Pasig here, and the one in Pasig will be non-bailable. So she will be put in jail while she is being tried, and it's now going to be her versus the people of the Philippines. And now she has to really defend herself in court.
And maybe one of my last questions, Sen, the Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission has done a yeoman's job no, here. What do you see in the future for them? Do they need more men? Do they need more resources? Is there a law perhaps that you can...
Well, John, they're created to address organized crime. And organized crime, I think the dimension before was just purely local, no? Yung mga sindikato locally.
Yeah.
But we all saw that organized crime is not limited to the local syndicates. It's actually a transnational activity. And in the last few years, we've seen more transnational crime happening in the Philippines and also around the region. So during the last hearing, a lot of the senators, including myself, were in agreement to increase their budget in 2025. But we will study also the possibility of institutionalizing. We're not sure whether that group or another group addressing transnational crime. Because in my opinion, in my analysis, transnational crime will be here to stay. As the world becomes digital, as the world becomes more integrated, you have cryptocurrencies now coming into play. It's easier to hide behind all of this technology. And these criminal elements will definitely use the interconnectedness and the digital face to hide themselves and to do crime.
In terms of the structure of the government bureaucracy, Sen, the PAOK, well, it's part of the Office of the President. It reports the Executive Secretary. By supporting it or institutionalizing a version of it, would you want it to be like a separate, a line agency or well, part of the PNP? Or
that's a great question, John. I think we have to call a spade a spade. Some of the enforcement agencies are we have doubts in some of the enforcement agencies, especially in organized crime. Because organized crime, from my own observation, is big money.
Yeah.
And this type of organizations, we're talking about hundreds of millions and even billions in terms of money flows. No? And temptation is heavy. So we have to make sure, whether it's in PNP or outside PNP, we have to make sure that it's, as much as possible, shielded from temptation, there's check and balance, and there's also clear accountability. We have to think of that very carefully, because right now, since it's not under PNP, it can move faster.
Yeah.
It can move faster, and since it reports to the president, they have that political will, so to speak, because they report straight to the president. So that type of dynamic we have to think about very carefully.
Maybe last question, Sen. What will happen to Bamban, the site in Bamban, or the one in Porac? I mean,
there are several proposals. I think the SWD is thinking of making it a halfway house for indigents. I think DND, the Department of National Defense, is also thinking of making it a training camp. I think DOH has a proposal to turn it into a hospital. So
interesting.
One thing for sure, once the government takes possession of that, government needs to make use of that, or else it will deteriorate.
That's right. Yeah.
And even though we have seized it, but if it's not put into good use, then sayang lang. No? So whether it's a hospital, halfway house, or a training facility, government needs to make use of it.
Thank you, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian. This has been a fascinating and educational conversation. And thank you also for all the work that you obviously put into the inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
And that's it for us today. The next step for engaged citizens, as always, is to take a more active part in our democracy. Download the Rappler Communities app to join the chat room of your choice. Thank you. This is John Nery. See you in the public square.